She became the most feared pirate in the English Channel. A noblewoman who personally beheaded French nobles on the decks of her warships and threw their bodies to the sea. Why? Because they murdered her husband, the love of her life, in cold blood and thought she'd just accept it. This is the story of Jeanne de Clisson, the woman who showed the world what true love looks like when it turns to rage. Picture this. It's 1343. A fleet of French naval vessels spots 3 black-sailed warships on the horizon. The ships are called My Revenge, painted entirely black with blood-red sails. And commanding them, a 43-year-old widow who spent the last decade hunting French nobility like animals. But this isn't just revenge. This is love turned into warfare. Jeanne de Clisson doesn't just attack, she boards every French ship personally. She fights alongside her crew. And when they capture French nobles, she takes them to the deck, looks them in the eyes, and beheads them herself. Every single one. Then she lets a few survivors go. Why? So they can sail back to King Philip VI of France and tell him exactly who did this. So he knows that Jeanne de Clisson, the woman whose soulmate he murdered, is coming for him. This is a woman who was never supposed to have power. Medieval noblewomen didn't command armies. They didn't wage war. They certainly didn't become pirates. But when you take away the person someone loves most in this world, you create something unstoppable. This is the greatest love story you've never heard. Not because it has a happy ending, but because it shows what happens when love refuses to die, even after death. How does a grieving widow become the most wanted woman in France? How does heartbreak become a weapon? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to 1300. Jeanne-Louise de Belleville is born into Breton nobility, not French, Breton. This matters. Brittany in the 14th century is technically independent, caught between France and England like a political football. Jeanne is married young, twice, actually. Her first husband dies. Her second husband dies. By 1328, she's widowed twice before she's even 30. This is medieval Europe. Marriages are political arrangements. Love is a bonus, not a requirement. Jeanne has experienced marriage, but not love. Then she meets Olivier de Clisson. And everything changes. Olivier is everything. He's a powerful Breton lord, a brilliant military commander, wealthy beyond measure. But here's what makes their story different. They actually fall in love. In an era where noble marriages are business transactions, Jeanne and Olivier choose each other. The historical records are clear about this. Unlike typical medieval political marriages, Jeanne and Olivier are partners. He values her counsel. She accompanies him to political meetings. They're raising their children together, not just producing heirs, but actually building a family. This is rare. This is precious. In 14th century Europe, this kind of marriage partnership is almost unheard of. They have 13 years together. 13 years of building a life, raising children, navigating the dangerous politics between France and England. 13 years of genuine partnership and love. And then France takes it all away. This is 1330, and France and England are about to explode into the 100 Years' War. Olivier sees which way the wind is blowing and pledges his loyalty to England. It's a political calculation, but it's also about principle. He believes England is the rightful power. Jeanne supports him completely. Because that's what partners do. King Philip VI of France doesn't appreciate Breton nobles choosing England over France. He especially doesn't appreciate Olivier de Clisson, who controls strategic territories Philip wants. So Philip does what medieval kings do when they can't control someone. He makes an example of them. 1343, the War of the Breton Succession is raging. Olivier is fighting for the English-backed side because that's where his loyalty, and his wife's support, lies. Then comes the Tournament of the Innocents. Olivier and 15 other Breton nobles are invited to participate in a grand tournament. It's supposed to be a truce, a moment of chivalry and honor during wartime. Jeanne doesn't want him to go, something feels wrong. But Olivier trusts in the code of chivalry. He shows up in good faith. It's a trap. Here's where love becomes loss. The moment Olivier and his companions arrive at the tournament, They're arrested. No charges. No trial. Just Philip VI deciding that these Breton nobles are traitors to France because they sided with England. Jeanne is at home with their children when she hears the news. Her husband, her partner, her love, the father of her children, has been taken prisoner by the French king. And she knows what's coming. Everyone knows what's coming. But Jeanne is Breton nobility. She has connections. She has wealth. Surely she can negotiate his release. Surely love and money can fix this. Olivier wasn't a traitor, he was following his feudal obligations. This is how feudalism works. She writes letters. Desperate letters. She sends representatives with offers of massive ransoms. She uses every political connection she has. She begs. She pleads. She offers everything she owns. Because she's trying to save the man she loves. Philip ignores it all. August 2nd, 1343. Without trial, without due process, without even formal charges, Olivier de Clisson is taken to Paris. He's paraded through the streets like a common criminal. Then they take him to Les Halles, the central marketplace where all of Paris can watch. And they behead him. Jeanne isn't there. She doesn't get to say goodbye. She doesn't get to hold his hand one last time. She doesn't get closure. She just gets the news. The love of her life is dead. But Philip isn't done twisting the knife. He wants to make sure everyone understands what happens to those who defy France. So he takes Olivier's head and displays it on a pike in Nantes, Brittany's capital. Jeanne has to see her husband's head on a spike. She has to walk through her own city and see what they did to him. She has to explain to their children why their father's head is displayed like a trophy. Think about this for a second. Jeanne is 43 years old. She's just watched the French king murder the love of her life in cold blood. She has children who are now fatherless. She has estates that are now vulnerable. She has no army. No military training. No fleet. She's supposed to mourn quietly. Marry again, maybe, find another political arrangement to protect her children. Transfer her lands to some French-approved noble. That's what widows do. That's what women do. Especially in 1343. That's what you do when you lose a husband. But this isn't about losing a husband. This is about losing your soulmate. And here's what happens when you take everything from someone who has nothing left to lose. Jeanne doesn't mourn quietly. She doesn't accept Philip's justice. Instead, she does something that medieval Europe has never seen a woman do. She declares war on France. Not for political gain. Not for territory. For love. For Olivier. For the 13 years they had together and the lifetime they were denied. She sells every piece of land she owns in France, castles, estates, vineyards, everything. Every place she and Olivier built memories together. She's liquidating her entire French fortune. And she's not doing it to flee or hide. She's building a war chest. She's buying vengeance. Philip's advisors are probably laughing. What's this widow going to do with money? She's just a heartbroken woman. She'll cry herself to sleep and eventually remarry. This is grief talking, not strategy. They have no idea what's coming. Jeanne takes her fortune to England, France's mortal enemy. And she makes a deal with King Edward III. She'll pledge her loyalty to England. She'll use her wealth to build a fleet. And she'll use that fleet to destroy French shipping, raid French coastal towns, and make Philip VI life absolute hell. Edward says yes immediately. Why wouldn't he? He's fighting France. He needs allies. And here's a wealthy Breton noblewoman with insider knowledge of French coastal defenses, French naval routes, French noble holdings. She's offering to become his privateer, basically a legal pirate working for the English crown. But Jeanne isn't some passive asset providing intelligence while men do the fighting. No, she's going to personally command her fleet. She's going to personally hunt French ships. She's going to personally execute French nobles. Because this isn't business. This is personal. This is love. She commissions 3 warships. Not merchant vessels converted to fighting, purpose-built warships. Fast, maneuverable, and heavily armed. She paints them entirely black, the color of mourning. The sails, blood red, for Olivier's blood. The name of her flagship, Ma Vengeance, my revenge. But it's not just revenge. It's a love letter written in blood and fire. She recruits a crew, and here's what's incredible. She gets veteran English and Breton sailors to serve under a woman. In 1343. These are hardened warriors who've spent their lives fighting, and they're taking orders from a 43-year-old widow who's never commanded a ship in her life. Why? Because they understand. They've seen what France did. They know this isn't just war, this is a woman fighting for the man she loved. And that kind of devotion, that kind of love turned to rage. That's the most dangerous force in the world. And Jeanne, she trains. She learns naval warfare. She learns combat. She learns how to board ships, how to command during battle, how to read the sea. She's not playing at being a naval commander, she's becoming one. For Olivier. Everything for Olivier. 1345, 2 years after Olivier's execution. The black ships with red sails appear in the English Channel for the first time. The hunt begins. This is where heartbreak becomes history. Jeanne's strategy is brilliant. She doesn't attack random French ships, she targets specific vessels. French naval ships. Supply ships heading to French military. And most importantly, ships carrying French nobles. The same class of people who murdered Olivier. She knows these waters. She and Olivier used to sail these coasts together. She knows where French ships travel, which routes they take, where they're vulnerable. Every piece of knowledge she gained during her 13 years with Olivier, she's weaponizing it now. Her first major attack is devastating. She catches a French supply ship heading to Brittany. Her crew boards it, overwhelms the defenders in minutes. They capture everyone alive, including 2 minor French nobles who were traveling with the shipment. Jeanne comes aboard personally. The captured nobles recognize her immediately. This is Olivier de Clisson's widow. They start begging, offering ransom, promising anything. She beheads them both, right there on the deck, with her own hands. Then she takes their bodies and throws them overboard. She keeps one person alive, one servant. And she tells him, go back to France. Go to Paris. Tell King Philip that Jeanne de Clisson, Olivier's wife, sends her regards. This becomes her signature move. Attack. Board. Execute French nobles personally. Let one person escape to tell the tale. Every attack is a message directly to Philip VI. I haven't forgotten my husband. I will never forget. And I'm coming for everyone you care about the way you took everyone I cared about. The terror spreads through French nobility like wildfire. Suddenly, no one wants to travel by sea. French nobles are cancelling voyages, refusing to leave port. Because everyone knows, if those black ships with red sails appear on the horizon, you're dead. And Jeanne? She's not hiding. She's not operating in secret. She attacks in broad daylight. She flies her colors proudly. She wants everyone to know it's her. Because this isn't just about destroying France, it's about making sure Philip knows that Olivier's wife is doing this. That love doesn't die just because one person does. She raids French coastal towns in Normandy, places she and Olivier visited together. Small raids, surgical strikes. She's not trying to conquer, she's trying to hurt. She burns French supply depots. She captures French weapons meant for the front lines. She disrupts French military operations up and down the coast. Every attack is an act of love. Every French noble she executes is a tribute to Olivier. Every ship she burns is a promise kept. I will make them pay for what they did to you. Philip VI is going insane. He's fighting England on multiple fronts. He's dealing with internal succession crises in Brittany. And now he has a widow with a personal vendetta destroying his naval supply lines and executing his nobles. He puts a bounty on her head. A massive bounty. But here's the problem. Jeanne is operating out of English ports. She has England's protection. And English sailors aren't going to betray her for French gold. Because everyone respects what she's doing. This isn't greed. This isn't ambition. This is love that refused to die. But then something unexpected happens. 1350, 7 years into her campaign of love and revenge, Jeanne de Clisson has become legendary. The French call her La Tigresse, the Tigress. English sailors call her the Lioness of Brittany. But to those who truly understand her story, she's simply Olivier's wife. The woman who loved so fiercely that death couldn't stop her. Songs are written about her. Not just battle songs, love songs. Tragic ballads about a woman who turned her grief into warfare. Parents tell their children her story, not to scare them, but to teach them what real love looks like. But she's not satisfied with just raids anymore. She wants bigger targets. She wants to hurt France where it really matters. She starts coordinating with English military operations. When England launches naval attacks against France, Jeanne's fleet is there. When England needs intelligence on French coastal defenses, Jeanne provides it. She's not just a privateer anymore, she's effectively an admiral in England's war effort. Think about the audacity of this. A woman is participating in high-level military strategy sessions with English commanders. They're asking her for advice on how to attack France. Male admirals are coordinating their attacks with her fleet. In 1350. All because she loved her husband so much she learned to wage war. She's earning this respect the hard way, through results. Every raid she leads succeeds. Every attack hits the target. Every piece of intelligence she provides is accurate. She's not playing at naval warfare, she's mastered it. For Olivier. Still for Olivier. Always for Olivier. Her biggest victory comes during a coordinated assault on French shipping near Normandy. English naval forces are attacking from the north. Jeanne's fleet hits from the west. The French are caught between them, and they're slaughtered. 6 French warships destroyed. Hundreds of French soldiers killed or captured. And Jeanne personally captures the French commander, a noble who was at the Tournament of the Innocents where they arrested Olivier. He recognizes her immediately. He starts pleading. He swears he had nothing to do with Olivier's execution. He was just following orders. He was just doing his duty to France. She tells him, "I'm just doing my duty to my husband." And she executes him. By 1351, French maritime trade through the English Channel has collapsed. Insurance rates for French vessels have skyrocketed, if you can even find someone willing to insure a French ship at all. French nobles refuse to travel by sea unless they have massive military escorts. Jeanne de Clisson has done what entire English naval fleets struggled to accomplish. She's made French waters too dangerous for France to use. All for love. And Philip VI. He's obsessed with her. His advisors report that he asks about her constantly. Where is she? What ships has she attacked? Has anyone caught her yet? This woman, this widow who loved her husband so much she became a warrior, is living rent-free in the French king's head. Then comes the storm. 1356, Jeanne has been keeping Olivier's memory alive through warfare for over a decade. She's untouchable, unstoppable, legendary. But even the greatest love stories face their darkest chapters. She's returning from a raid when a massive storm hits the English Channel. Not just any storm, one of those medieval tempests that swallows entire fleets. Her 3 black ships are caught in the open water with nowhere to hide. The waves are the size of buildings. The wind tears her blood-red sails to shreds. And one by one, her ships, her instruments of love turned to vengeance, start to break apart. Her crew is dying around her. Men she's fought beside for years are being swept overboard. Her beautiful warships are being torn apart by the sea. Everything she's built in Olivier's name is disintegrating in the storm. 2 of her ships go down. Just gone. Hundreds of her crew drowned. Her fleet, decimated. Her flagship, Mar Vengeance, barely survives. It limps toward the Breton coast, taking on water, sails destroyed, hull breached. Jeanne and the surviving crew manage to beach it before it sinks completely. She's lost almost everything. Most of her crew. Most of her ships. Her weapons. Her supplies. She's stranded on the Breton coast, which is technically French-controlled territory. If French forces find her, she's dead. And here's the worst part, she's 56 years old now. She's been fighting for 13 years. She's exhausted. She's injured from the storm. And for the first time since Olivier's death, she's vulnerable. The French hear about the shipwreck. They hear rumors that the Lioness of Brittany, Olivier's avenging widow, might be stranded on their coast. Soldiers start searching. They want her head. They want to parade her through Paris the way they paraded Olivier. They want to end this love story once and for all. This is it. This is where her story should end. Captured by the people she's been terrorizing. Executed like her husband. Finally reunited with Olivier in death. A tragic but inevitable ending to history's most violent love story. But love doesn't give up that easily. Jeanne and her surviving crew don't wait to be captured. They salvage what they can from the wreckage and disappear into the Breton countryside. She still has connections here. Secret supporters who remember Olivier. Breton nobles who understand that what she's doing isn't madness, it's devotion. She goes underground, but she doesn't stop fighting. With no ships and no fleet, she does something even more audacious. She starts organizing a network of informants throughout Brittany and Normandy. Fishermen. Dock workers. Merchants. Anyone who can tell her where French ships are, where French nobles are traveling, when they're vulnerable. And then she starts coordinating attacks through proxy crews. She can't captain a ship anymore, but she can plan the raids. She can identify the targets. She can orchestrate the attacks from shore. Because stopping would mean letting Olivier's memory die. And she will never let that happen. The black ships never return. But French ships keep getting attacked. French nobles keep disappearing. And the survivors all tell the same story. The raids are too precise, too well planned. Someone with intimate knowledge of French operations is still out there. Still hunting. Still loving. The French go mad trying to find her. They search every port, every coastal town. They interrogate sailors, merchants, dock workers. But Jeanne is invisible now. She's learned that you don't need ships to wage war, you just need love strong enough to never give up. Then, in 1359, something changes. King Philip VI, the man who executed Olivier, the man who turned a love story into a war story, dies. Just dies. Not in battle. Not assassinated. He dies of illness, probably stress-related. The man who murdered her husband is dead. When Jeanne hears the news, she doesn't celebrate. She doesn't throw a party. According to accounts, she simply says, "Good. Now Olivier can rest." Because it was never about her satisfaction. It was about honoring the man she loved. With Philip dead, Jeanne finally allows herself to consider peace. The new French king, John II, is dealing with his own problems. He's not interested in continuing his father's obsession with one Breton widow. He quietly signals that if Jeanne stops her campaign, France will leave her alone. She accepts. Not because she's forgiven France. Not because she's tired. But because she's fulfilled her vow. She made France pay for Olivier's murder. She proved that their love was stronger than any king's cruelty. She retires to her estates in Brittany, the lands she never sold, the lands where she and Olivier built their life together. She lives peacefully for the first time in 16 years. But she never remarries. Never even considers it. Because in her heart, she's still married to Olivier. Death didn't break their bond, it transformed it into something unstoppable. Jeanne de Clisson dies in 1359, in her bed, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Olivier's children and grandchildren. She's 59 years old. She dies a free woman, wealthy, respected, feared. Her last words, according to family records, "I kept my promise to you, my love." She's buried in Brittany. And though there's no record of it, historians believe she's buried wearing black, the color she wore for 16 years. The color of a love that refused to die. But here's the most beautiful part. So here's what happened after Jeanne died. France tried to erase her. They didn't write about her in their official histories. They didn't include her in their records of the 100 Years' War. When French chroniclers mentioned the mysterious pirate attacks in the English Channel during the 1340s and 1350s, They attributed them to English privateers. Male English privateers. They couldn't admit that a woman had terrorized France for over a decade out of love. They couldn't admit that the most effective naval campaign against France during that era was waged by a widow honoring her husband's memory. They couldn't admit that love could be that powerful. So they just deleted her from history. For centuries, Jeanne de Clisson was a footnote. A legend. A story passed down through Breton families but never confirmed by French official records. Historians treated her like a romantic myth. Surely this story was exaggerated. Surely a woman couldn't have actually commanded warships and executed nobles all for love. It wasn't until modern historians started digging through English records, Breton family histories, and maritime archives that they proved she was real. The black ships existed. The raids happened. The love was genuine. Jeanne de Clisson was real. And everything they tried to erase about her was true. Think about what her story really means. This isn't just a revenge tale. This is the greatest love story in medieval history. Most love stories end with happily ever after. Some end with till death do us part. But Jeanne and Olivier's love story? It didn't end with death. It transformed with death. When Olivier died, Jeanne could have mourned and moved on. She could have remarried for protection. She could have accepted the narrative that her husband was a traitor who deserved his fate. She could have let his memory fade. Instead, she turned her love into warfare. She turned her grief into strategy. She turned her heartbreak into the most feared naval force in the English Channel. For 13 years, she woke up every morning and chose Olivier. She chose to honor him. She chose to fight for him. She chose to make France remember his name. That's what real love looks like. Not the fairy tale version. Not the romantic comedy version. But the raw, powerful, unstoppable version that refuses to accept injustice even when the whole world tells you to move on. Jeanne proved that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you dangerous. She proved that devotion isn't passive, it's the most active force in the world. She proved that the strongest warriors aren't the ones fighting for glory or gold, they're the ones fighting for the people they love. And here's what makes this the perfect Valentine's Day story. Jeanne and Olivier only had 13 years together. Just 13 years out of a whole lifetime. But those 13 years were so powerful, so genuine, so deep that Jeanne spent the next 16 years, longer than their marriage, honoring that love. Most people can't maintain a relationship for 13 years while the person is alive. Jeanne maintained hers for 16 years after he died. France tried to erase this love story. They tried to pretend it never happened. They tried to reduce Jeanne to a footnote and Olivier to a traitor. But love doesn't stay buried. Love doesn't stay erased. And eventually, the truth comes out. Jeanne de Clisson spent 13 years married to the love of her life, and 16 years making sure the world never forgot him. She became a pirate, a naval commander, and the most feared woman in medieval Europe, all because she loved one man so completely that his death couldn't end it. They tried to erase the greatest love story in history. They failed. This Valentine's Day, we're doing something different. Tomorrow, we're releasing part 2 of this love story special, Princess Olga of Kiev, another woman who turned love into legendary revenge. 2 days, 2 women, 2 love stories that refuse to die. Hit subscribe if you want to see what happens when you mess with a woman in love. Because history shows us, that's the most dangerous thing you can do. And drop a comment, what would you do for the person you love most in this world? How far would you go? Because Jeanne de Clisson went further than anyone thought possible. And she proved that love, real, deep, unstoppable love, is the most powerful force in human history. Remember, they can try to erase us from history. But they can never erase what we did for love. Happy Valentine's Day. Go love someone the way Jeanne loved Olivier, completely, fiercely, and without apology. Underscore 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 underscore